This project was made possible by a grant approved by the Americana Corner Preserving America Grant Program. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations do not necessarily represent those of the Americana Corner Preserving America Grant Program. Americana Corner was founded by Tom Hand in 2020 as an online resource to help others rediscover America's incredible founding and first century of expansion. The Americana Corner Grant Program assists organizations to tell the story of our nation's wonderful past and rekindle a love for American history in all its splendor. This video is intended for children in grades 3 through 5. However, it is suggested that adults preview the video in determining suitability for use with children. This video features the perspective of a non-native settler on the Virginia frontier during the time period of the American Revolutionary War. It is not intended to serve as a sole representation of all people of that era, nor is it intended to represent any other perspective from that time. There is mention and portrayal of death, and mention of violence and portrayal of violent action included. Note, no animals were harmed or killed for the purpose of this video. Fort Randolph was located near where the Ohio and Kanawha rivers meet, and where present-day Point Pleasant, West Virginia is now located. Built in 1776, Fort Randolph's purpose was to serve as an American outpost for protection and defense during the American Revolution, which it did until 1779. During that time, both regular Continental troops and militia were garrisoned at the fort. The regular Continental troops garrisoned at Fort Randolph were the 5th Company of the 12th of Virginia. These men were issued red-colored shirts for their uniforms. This was the only piece of uniform they were given. The militia troops at Fort Randolph were ordinary people who were not considered regular soldiers, but who came together as a formal group to provide military help when needed. Militia troops were not issued any type of uniform. They wore their own personal clothes and used their own personal weapons. They also often provided their own supplies and provisions. Fort Randolph's purpose was to protect the western border of the Virginia colony from attacks by the Native Americans, who were allies of the British. So the men at Fort Randolph spent much of their time drilling, which meant they practiced working together as a unit and firing their weapons efficiently. Scouting, which meant going outside the fort into the surrounding area to see what the enemy might be up to, and keeping their equipment and clothes in good working order. This meant when something broke, they had to find a way to fix it. And when their clothes needed mended, they mended their clothes themselves. They also prepared and cooked their own meals. The men there had to be ready at a moment's notice should they need to defend the fort. Troops were garrisoned at Fort Randolph until 1779. The men who were at Fort Randolph were needed elsewhere to help with fighting the British, so the fort was abandoned. After the men left the fort, the natives destroyed it by burning it to the ground. But Fort Randolph had served its purpose. The men who were there had helped protect America's backcountry during an important time in American history.